The O Cannabis Conference and Expo returns to Toronto June 1st through the 3rd, and there's still some good booth locations available. This exciting event is free for cannabis retailers and will feature Tommy Chong receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award at the O Cannabis Industry Awards. For more information about exhibiting or to register to attend, go to ocannabis.com. That's OCANNABIZ.com.
Apparently, cannabis and hemp oil prices nationwide are falling, even though supply is growing. And we just had a whole bunch of fires kind of decimate a lot of crops. And yet, Canada is announcing that their sales are growing, and yet they have a glut of edibles and dried cannabis. So, we're going to dip our toes into the wholesale market price ending November 6th and kind of see where prices are headed during this time of harvest, as well as kind of predicting future prices post harvest with, again, like we said, with the fires that are happening, and try to find some balance here on what prices are going to do next year. Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, capital markets analyst and host of your Cannabis Business Podcast. Let's take a look at this report here real quick on where prices are going with cannabis here. Wholesale prices looking a little bit lower, changing a little bit here. So US outdoor, for example, is still around between $950 and $1,000 for US outdoor. US spot price for a pound is still around 1650. That differentiates again between outdoor, greenhouse, and indoor, as well as medical. So indoor prices are around $2,000, where greenhouse is 1,500, and U.S. medical is around $1,800 a pound. So that price per gram, we're still looking at around $6 for a price per pound. In Canada, that means that pounds are a little over $2,000, which makes for a nice little arbitrage situation if you were able to cross state lines and buy in a place like Colorado for $7 and then sell it in Michigan for 27. It's a nice little profit. Unfortunately, you can't do that. Looks like the best arbitrage right now is basically going from Arizona to Alaska, buying at $7 and selling at 37. So it looks like the fires haven't really hit prices yet. Maybe good timing with harvest season coming out. We're seeing a drop in wholesale prices reflecting multiple market factors working simultaneously and at sometimes odds with one another. So cannabis demand, for starters, it rose after dozens of states declared cannabis essential and allowed them to stay open during the pandemic as consumers stocked up and have continued to drive cannabis sales month over month. That in response have cultivators growing more plentiful supplies of cannabis, which in turn has put a downward pressure on oil prices despite robust demands for oil-derived products like concentrates and edibles and vape pens. Prices for kilos of cannabis distillate in California, for example, are selling for around $5,000 a kilo, down from $6,000 per kilo prior to the outbreak. I'm assuming that's not an isolate because isolates are selling for a lot less than that. But full spectrum distillate, I mean, it's cheaper than it was in 2018 for $15,000 to $18,000 a kilo. So significantly cheaper as more and more farms come online. So on the hemp derivative CBD side, THC remediated crude oil is selling for less than $1,000 a kilo in California. Prior to the outbreak, it sold for more than that. And hemp derived CBD crude oil that still contains THC is selling for below $200 a kilo, down from about $500. So in Colorado, you can see that 90% THC tested distillate it's selling for around $7 to $9, and that's down from where it was at 11 to 12 pre-pandemic. In Oregon, it's much cheaper. It's selling for around $5 a gram. And the cheaper prices reflected a glut of raw cannabis because of overproduction across the state, a situation that's beginning to take hold in Oklahoma, which we forecasted years ago when we saw that they had 7,500 licenses, twice the amount of Oregon. And Oregon is very well known for having an abundance of cannabis, a million joints equivalent. They have a ton. They have overproduced, and that's why the fires were supposed to help with prices. But again, with this harvest season, that's probably not going to happen until next fire season. I'm guessing June at the earliest, we'll have this. And so, depending on how much crops were decimated by the West Coast fires that were in California and Oregon, Washington, Colorado, California, Canada, everywhere, it still hasn't affected the price yet, which could be one of two things. Either it hasn't happened yet, it's going to wait until summertime for those prices to skyrocket, or it's not going to happen because there was already so much of an oversupply that these prices have to keep going down. And Canadian cannabis sales are growing to 245 million in August, despite some early markers or trends that there's a glut in flower and edibles. We'll get to that in a moment. But just kind of looking at Canadian sales of adult use that grew 5.2% from July to August, reaching a monthly total of almost 245 million Canadian dollars. So as a monthly record for Canadian marijuana sales implies an annualized market with more than $2.9 billion. And yet we're showing that supply glut grows for Canada edibles and dried cannabis. So is that because the edibles are too expensive? Is that because the dried cannabis isn't good enough? Why is there a glut? So there is a discrepancy between sales of cannabis edibles and inventory in Canada, which is growing, according to the most recent data from the federal health regulator. It looks like the pandemic craze of hoarding edibles early in the year have kind of declined as the summer picked up and maybe less scared of the pandemic. But overall, month over month sales growth fell from 50% early in the year to 9.5% in May, and then 11% in June. And most of that was in the adult use market, just a small amount in the medical market. And so dried cannabis inventory is continuing to rise as well. There's a 720 metric tons of unpackaged cannabis that was held in stock in June by cultivators and processors. And in package inventory of dried cannabis held in stock by cultivators, processors, distributors, and retailers was only 82,500 kilos in the same month. But Health Canada hasn't disclosed sales of dried cannabis in kilos since last year, maybe trying to avoid looking a little bit like Oregon with a massive glut. And again, that kind of just goes back to why. Is it just not top quality? Is it too expensive? Is it not convenient? Is it all of the above? So I think we're gonna have to wait until the springtime to really kind of figure out what's happening right now, whether there is a true glut or whether there's an excess of supply. It's somewhere in between. Prices will definitely find that equilibrium between supply and demand. But if the fires truly did take out high quality CBD and hemp, then that's going to leave inferior products on the shelf in Canada not selling. A lot of what we saw in Oregon was the same issue, and it took a long time for those products to be put into extracts or whatever else that got them sold or just discounted. But regardless, I think we're going to see the results of the fires as well as harvest season come into play around June, July, and equilibrium prices will kind of kick off at that point to kind of see where we're going to be at, as well as 420. Like we notice every year on 420, those sales prices end up being the everyday low sales price 2 years later. So 2019's 420 sale prices will be 2021's everyday low price, which is why it's important to kind of take a look at these reports to see what's going to happen, which means you got to just come back to the Talking Hedge and find out. With that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out. Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out and check out these other videos that we've got.
How do cannabis CEOs balance growth and optimization strategies? What is THCO, Delta 10, and CBNA, and why should you care about these minor cannabinoids? And why isn't the endocannabinoid system covered in medical school? Most people think they're up to date in trends in the cannabis industry, but they're about 6 weeks behind. Learn about what is truly next in the cannabis space by joining myself, Brian Fields, and Kellen Finney every week on the Dime Podcast, and of course, on PodConnects.